Welcome to this edition of Grassroots Advocacy. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. During our last episode, we talked about some essential building blocks of being an advocate, and they are passion, be, know, and do. In this episode, we are going to talk about the importance of communication in the advocacy process. In order to create a framework, I'd like to ask you to consider this basic cycle of the communications process, which starts with you, the grassroots advocate, and it starts with you having the realization that you have a thought, feeling, or emotion that needs to be expressed. Then you move from that acknowledgement that you have to communicate to encoding, which is deciding how to communicate the message that you have. And then you actually send that message in some form or fashion, and it gets to the receiver. That could be you, the audience. Then you have an opportunity to interpret that message. Pardon me, I'm having a senior moment. You have the opportunity to interpret that message, which is referred to as decoding. And then you provide some feedback. That feedback might be that you hit the like button on Facebook, or that you send me an email that says, "Hey, Jeff, great job." And that's feedback. And that's the communication cycle. Now, as grassroots advocates, you are thinking about, what is the message I want to send, or why do I need to send a message to begin with? And then you're recognizing in the encoding process that there are some key things you need to think about. The first thing is, who's my audience? Who am I communicating to? And this is really very important, because this is an opportunity for you to customize the message you send and how you send it. Then you are going to think about, what's my purpose? Am I trying to win the hearts and the minds of the people I'm communicating with? Am I trying to get them to take action, like casting a vote or emailing a representative? Or am I merely trying to inform, to give them a new frame of reference to think about a particular topic? Then, as you're still in the encoding process, you're going to think about, is my message clear, concise, and to the point? 1,000 words is not going to make the story any better than 10 well-placed words. The final thing that you're going to think about in the encoding process is, what's the best way to communicate your message? Now, sometimes it could be talking with someone, or it could be writing a note or something like that. So you want to think about that. Now, it's also helpful, I want to give you a concept to think about, which is that less can be more. When I was a youngster in high school, I had the opportunity to do lots of essay tests. Didn't particularly like them very much. And I had this one teacher, we'll call him Mr. T, to protect his identity and his right to privacy. And Mr. T stopped me one day when I was on my way out of class. And he said, "Jeff, I discovered something about you." And I said, "Well, what's that, Mr. T?" And he shared with me that he realized that when I knew the answers, when I knew the material, I wrote very short and to the point essay responses. When I didn't know the material, I would write paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. Inside, I kind of thought to myself, I'm either going to dazzle them with brilliance or baffle them with, and you can insert your own colorful thought there. So it's really interesting that when we think about that, so keeping it tight and short and to the point is really very helpful. You see on the screen some notable people in our history. The first person is Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of the United States of America. He spoke a lot during his presidency. One of the most memorable pieces of his speech for Americans is, "All men are created equal." Now, it's not the first time that statement was made, but it was this statement in the Gettysburg Address that was really important, because it was an acknowledgement that that skin pigment and national origin and those sorts of things weren't really intended to separate us. The next person on the screen is John Fitzgerald Kennedy. President Kennedy served only a short period of time in his presidency. He also made a number of really great speeches. One of my favorite phrases from his speeches is, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And I thought that that was really a very powerful phrase, because it causes us to think about what is our responsibilities of citizens of the United States of America. What do we have to do to contribute to this great experiment, which is called democracy? Next to President Kennedy is Dr. Martin Luther King. And Dr. Martin Luther King was so eloquent and so powerful in his speeches. And he said something that I will always remember, and I would imagine you remember as well, and that is, "I have a dream." I really, really appreciated that portion of Dr. King's speech because it was inspirational. It caused me to think about something much larger than myself. It caused me to aspire to a greater sense of self and a greater sense of society. And of course, next to Dr. King is our wonderful First Lady, Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama did a speech at the Democratic National Convention, and she spoke for she probably spoke for about 45 minutes or so. My most favorite line that she said, and it was a tagline that she used repeatedly, is, "When they go low, we go high." And it really spoke to me because it gave me an opportunity to think about the inner conflict that occurs for each of us when it comes to our better angels and our lesser demons, and that struggle, and the encouragement to always go with the angel because they're going to have your back. So when you think about this process of encoding and developing your message, it's really very important, and it leads us to the transmission piece, or how I'm going to get my message out there, how I'm going to communicate or send it out there so that folks are able to receive the message I'm sending out. And so when we think about transmission, it's important to think about modes of transmission, or ways or means. For example, a conversation between two people is a mode or means of communication, not transportation, but communication. We can also think about nonverbal communication, what that means to us. I remember watching television, watching the news, and seeing this young man in Tiananmen Square laying down in front of a tank. He never said a single word, but that mere act of laying down in front of that tank communicated volumes about his desire to resist a dictatorship and his desire to resist the government stifling education and growth and development. So you could think about it in terms of that as being a means of communication, or a method of communication is nonverbal communication. Let's also think about written communication. And written communication is one of those areas, I can only speak for myself. It's something I'm constantly striving to do better. I did not pay as close attention in English class as I ought to have. And so occasionally I have issues with punctuations or word use and capitalization and things like that. So if you're like me, and that's true, I would encourage you not to let that scare you off from writing, because there are things you can do, things that I have done that you can also do. For example, I'm not a particularly strong writer, but there's a member of the NAHCA team who is a really great writer. And so I oftentimes will write things and send it to him and ask him to proof it. And he'll come back and say, well, a comma might go here, or a semicolon might go there, or you might choose to use active voice versus passive voice, these different things. So you can get help. So please don't hesitate to write, because it's really not so much about the writing as it is about the message that's contained in the writing that's going to be super meaningful for people, for the receivers of your message. Now, when you think about written communication, you can think about writing articles, you can think about sending emails, you can think about publishing articles for your local newspaper or your local community communications outlets and that sort of thing. Then I also want you to think about the power of social media. We are in such a remarkable time in history because you can type a single message in 280 characters, you can hit send, and instantaneously it can be received by literally millions of people. Or you can make a post on Facebook and it can be it can be shared and it can be liked and it can be all of these other things, which helps that message to spread exponentially. So it's really worthwhile to think about social media and its impact and how you could possibly include that in the overall your overall communications strategy. Now, so once you've transmitted the message or you've sent the message, it's going to be received by the person, hopefully, who you intended for it to go to. And that person, of course, is referred to as the receiver. And then they're going to need to decode that message. And basically what that means is they're going to have to try to understand what was the intended message and what were the intended actions and what did you really want out of that communication that you initiated. Then they get the opportunity to provide you feedback. And that feedback can be something as simple as a smile and a nod, like I agree with you, so we go to the north and south. Or it could be a look at you as if though there's some sort of appendage growing out of the center of your forehead. So you could get those very simple sorts of feedback. You could also get the feedback because that person runs out and calls or emails their elected official to say that they support or that they oppose a particular issue. Or it could be that their feedback is they change the way that they're performing or behaving or interacting with the men and women that you care for. So that's our communication cycle, and it's really a nice, tight circle for us to think about. So as we've kind of gone through these different steps, I want you to really think about, as an advocate, what message do I want to send? How do I want to send it? What do I expect from my audience or the recipients? What feedback I should anticipate? I want you to think through those things. I really encourage you to do that with some purpose. So I really appreciate that you shared your time with us today. In our next segment, we're going to talk about how we gather information for communications process, because I can tell you that facts matter. And it's really important for us to build facts into our passionate communication. So I look forward to seeing you then. As we close today, let's please consider this quote. Trust is the glue of life. It's the most essential ingredient in effective communication. It is the foundational principle that holds all relationships. Stephen Covey. See you next week.